The shadows grow longer as the late afternoon sun begins to set. The familiar creaking of the wooden floorboards under my feet is the only sound that accompanies me as I move through my grandfather's old Victorian home. My name is James Thornfield, and I've returned to settle his estate after his passing just 2 weeks ago. This house on the outskirts of Boston has stood for over a century, weathering storms both natural and familial. I hadn't visited in years, not since I was a boy. My grandfather, Edward Thornfield, was something of a recluse in his final years, and our relationship had grown distant, separated by both miles and misunderstandings. As I move through the rooms filled with antique furniture draped in white sheets, memories flood back. The smell of pipe tobacco still lingers in the air, mixed with the mustiness that comes from rooms seldom aired. Dust particles dance in the slanting rays of sunlight that filter through the heavy velvet curtains. I've been putting off going into his study, the room that was once forbidden to me as a child. But today, I can delay no longer. The solicitor needs the deed to the house, and grandfather always kept his important papers locked in the mahogany desk that dominated that particular room. The brass doorknob feels cold against my palm as I turn it, and the door opens with a protesting groan. The study looks exactly as I remember it. Bookshelves lining the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes. The Persian carpet faded, but still magnificent, and the desk, imposing and secretive, standing before the bay window. I cross to the desk and pull open the top drawer. It slides out smoothly, revealing a neat arrangement of pens, ink bottles, and stationery. The second drawer contains ledgers, their pages filled with my grandfather's meticulous handwriting. In the third drawer, I find a small brass key tied with a red ribbon. This must be for the locked drawer at the bottom of the desk. I insert it into the keyhole and turn it, hearing the satisfying click of the mechanism releasing. The drawer is heavy, filled with folders and documents. As I rifle through them, looking for the deed, my fingers brush against something hard and rectangular at the back of the drawer. Curious, I pull it out. It's an old photograph album bound in faded burgundy leather, the edges worn smooth from handling. Embossed on the cover in gold lettering that has almost completely rubbed away are the words, "Memories of Ravenwood." Ravenwood, the name of my grandfather's hometown in rural Massachusetts, a place he rarely spoke of. I open the album and a folded piece of yellowed paper falls out onto my lap. Setting the album aside, I carefully unfold the paper. It's a letter, the handwriting faded but still legible. "My dearest Edward," it begins. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have finally found the courage to look through my personal effects. There are things you need to know, things I could never bring myself to tell you in person, about Ravenwood, about the Winters family, and most importantly, about the photograph. I have carried the secret for too long, and it has weighed on me like a millstone. Perhaps in sharing it with you, I can finally find some peace, even if it is from beyond the grave." The album contains the evidence of what happened in the summer of 1903. Study it carefully, especially the portrait of the old woman. Her smile holds the key to understanding everything. Be careful, Edward. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Your loving father, Thomas Thornfield. My hands tremble slightly as I set the letter aside and reach for the album again. The spine creaks as I open it fully, revealing the first page. There, in careful script, is written, "Ravenwood, Massachusetts, summer 1903. I turn the page, and I'm greeted by a series of photographs, the kind taken with the large format cameras of the era. They're formal portraits mostly, of stern-faced men and women in their Sunday best, staring solemnly into the camera, as was the custom of the time. Each photograph has a small notation beneath it, identifying the subject and the date. I flip through several pages, seeing nothing unusual until I reach a page near the middle of the album. The portrait shows an elderly woman seated in an ornate chair. Her hair is arranged in the style of the period, pulled back severely from her face. She's wearing a high-necked black dress with a cameo brooch at her throat. But what immediately strikes me is her expression. Unlike the others in the album, she's smiling. A slight but unmistakable upturning of the lips that gives her face an almost mischievous appearance. Beneath the photograph, in the same neat handwriting, is written, "Mrs. Eleanor Winters, June 17th, 1903. And below that, in a different hand, shakier, more urgent, are the words, "Taken June 17th, Mrs. Winters died June 15th. A chill runs down my spine as I stare at the photograph. How could this woman be smiling if she was already dead when the picture was taken? In 1903, photography required subjects to remain still for extended periods. It wasn't possible to capture a fleeting expression, let alone manufacture one on a deceased person. I continue turning the pages, but the rest of the album is empty. Blank pages waiting for photographs that were never added. Returning to the letter, I read it again, paying closer attention to the details. My great-grandfather Thomas mentions evidence and warns about doors that can't be closed. What exactly happened in Ravenwood in 1903? The sound of the grandfather clock in the hallway striking 6 startles me out of my reverie. The light has grown dimmer, the shadows in the study longer and more pronounced. I should turn on a lamp, but something holds me back. Instead, I find myself drawn to the window, looking out at the gathering dusk. The house sits on a hill overlooking the town, and from this vantage point, I can see the lights beginning to flicker on in the homes below. It's a peaceful scene, yet I can't shake the unease that has settled over me like a shroud. I need to know more about this photograph and the story behind it. My grandfather's solicitor, Mr. Harrison, has been handling the family's affairs for decades. Perhaps he can shed some light on this mystery. As if summoned by my thoughts, the telephone in the hallway rings. I hurry to answer it, grateful for the interruption of my unsettling thoughts. Thornfield residence, I answer, the formality feeling strange on my tongue. James, it's Harrison. The solicitor's voice sounds tinny and distant on the line. I was calling to see if you'd found the deed yet. Not yet, Mr. Harrison, but I found something else, a photograph album with a rather disturbing note. It concerns my great-grandfather Thomas and something that happened in Ravenwood in 1903. A photograph of a dead woman who appears to be smiling. Does any of this mean anything to you? There's a long pause on the other end of the line, so long that I wonder if the connection has been lost. Mr. Harrison? Are you still there? Yes, I'm here. His voice has changed, grown cautious. James, I think it would be best if we discuss this in person. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? 9 o'clock? Of course, but... And James? Don't mention this to anyone else. And I would advise you to put the album back where you found it for now. Before I can ask why, he's hung up, leaving me staring at the receiver in confusion. I slowly replace it in its cradle, my mind racing with questions. Why would Mr. Harrison react so strongly to the mention of a century-old photograph? And why the warning to keep it to myself? I return to the study, the album still open on the desk to Mrs. Winter's smiling face. In the fading light, her expression seems to have changed subtly, the smile more pronounced, almost as if she's in on a secret joke at my expense. It's just a trick of the light, I tell myself. Yet I can't help but feel that those eyes are following me as I move around the room. Despite Mr. Harrison's advice, I can't bring myself to return the album to the drawer just yet. Instead, I tuck it under my arm and head upstairs to my bedroom. I need to study this photograph more carefully, and I'll need better light to do so. The staircase creaks under my weight, each step a groan of protest from the aged wood. The upstairs hallway is dark, the wall sconce is unlit. I fumble for the light switch, but when I flick it, nothing happens. Power outage, I mutter to myself. It's not unusual in these old houses with their outdated wiring. I continue down the hallway to my room, guided only by the faint glow from the windows. As I pass my grandfather's bedroom, I notice that the door is ajar, though I'm certain I had closed it earlier. A draft perhaps, or maybe the latch didn't catch properly. In my room, I'm relieved to find my flashlight still on the nightstand where I left it. I switch it on, and the beam cuts through the darkness, creating unsettling shadows that seem to move of their own accord. I set the album down on the bed and open it again to the portrait of Mrs. Winters. Under the harsh light of the flashlight, new details emerge that I hadn't noticed before. The chair she's seated in has claw-like feet that dig into an ornate oriental rug. Behind her, partially in shadow, is what appears to be a painting of a coastal scene. A lighthouse perched on a rocky promontory, waves crashing against the shore. But it's her eyes that capture my attention now. In this light, they seem to hold a gleam that wasn't apparent before, a liveliness that is at odds with the notion that she was deceased when the photograph was taken. I flip the page over, wondering if there might be additional information written on the back. There isn't, but I notice something else. A slight bulge in the page, as if something thin is sandwiched between the photograph and the backing paper. Carefully, I work my fingernail under the edge of the photograph, taking care not to tear the delicate paper. It lifts away from the backing, revealing a small, folded piece of paper hidden underneath. With trembling fingers, I extract it and unfold it. It's a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The masthead reads Ravenwood Gazette, and the date is June 16th, 1903, one day after Mrs. Winters supposedly died, and one day before the photograph was allegedly taken. The headline catches my breath. Local photographer found dead in studio. I read on, my heart pounding in my chest. The body of Mr. Thomas Thornfield, proprietor of Thornfield Photography Studio on Main Street, was discovered yesterday evening by his assistant, Mr. Frederick Simmons. According to Mr. Simmons, he became concerned when Mr. Thornfield failed to return home after a scheduled appointment with Mrs. Eleanor Winters, a respected elder of our community. Upon investigating the studio, Mr. Simmons found Mr. Thornfield slumped over his camera, apparently having suffered a sudden apoplexy. The camera was set up for a portrait session, but Mrs. Winters was nowhere to be found. In a tragic coincidence, it was later learned that Mrs. Winters herself had passed away in her sleep 2 nights prior, on the evening of June 14th. Her body was being prepared for burial by the local undertaker at the time of Mr. Thornfield's appointment. Mr. Thornfield, 42, leaves behind a wife, Martha, and a young son, Edward. Funeral services will be held. The clipping ends there, torn off at the bottom. I stare at it, trying to make sense of what I've just read. According to this article, both my great-grandfather Thomas and Mrs. Winters were dead before the date inscribed beneath the photograph. If Thomas died on June 15th and Mrs. Winters died on June 14th, who took the photograph on June 17th? And how could Mrs. Winters be in it, smiling no less, when she was already deceased? A sudden gust of wind rattles the window, making me jump. Outside, the sky has grown completely dark, and the wind has picked up, sending clouds scudding across the face of the moon. A storm is brewing, both outside and in my mind. I need answers, and I can't wait until morning to speak with Mr. Harrison. There must be more information somewhere in this house. Journals, letters, something that can shed light on this increasingly disturbing mystery. I return to the study, album and flashlight in hand. If my grandfather kept this album, he might have kept other items related to his father's life and death in Ravenwood. I begin a systematic search of the desk drawers again, then move on to the bookshelves, pulling volumes at random and flipping through them for any hidden notes or clippings. After an hour of fruitless searching, I'm about to give up when I notice something odd about the oriental rug beneath the desk. One corner is slightly turned up, and the floorboards beneath look lighter than those surrounding them, as if they've been protected from wear. I move the desk aside. It's heavy, but adrenaline gives me strength, and roll back the rug. Sure enough, there's a trapdoor set into the floor with a small brass ring serving as a handle. I tug on it and the door lifts up, revealing a small storage space beneath. Inside is a leather satchel, the kind photographers of the early 20th century used to carry their equipment. My pulse quickens as I lift it out and set it on the desk. The clasp is tarnished but still functional. It opens with a soft click. The contents are exactly what I hoped to find: my great-grandfather's personal effects. There's a journal bound in dark leather, several loose photographs, and most intriguingly, a smaller version of the camera he would have used in his studio. A folding pocket Kodak, revolutionary for its time but primitive by today's standards. I open the journal first, flipping to the final entries. The last one is dated June 15th, 1903, the day Thomas Thornfield died, according to the newspaper clipping. I have made a terrible mistake. The entry begins, the handwriting noticeably shakier than in previous pages. In my quest to capture what lies beyond the veil, I have opened a door that should have remained closed. Mrs. Winters warned me of the dangers, but I was too blinded by ambition to heed her. The process works. That much I have proven beyond doubt. But the cost, dear God, the cost is too high. They are not meant to return, even in image form. When the silver nitrate captures their essence, it creates a bridge, a way back, and they are coming through now. I can hear them, scratching at the edges of reality. Mrs. Winters was right. The dead should be allowed to rest, she said. To capture their image after death is to disturb their journey. And now she herself has passed, and I am obligated by my promise to take her final portrait tomorrow. Her family insists upon it, but I cannot. I will not after what I've seen. The camera doesn't merely record what is before it. It can capture what should not be there at all. And once captured, these things can find their way back. I will destroy my equipment tonight and burn my negatives. Perhaps it is not too late to close the door I have so foolishly opened. If anyone finds this journal after I am gone, heed my warning. Some boundaries were never meant to be crossed. Some images were never meant to be captured. The entry ends there. I sit back, my mind reeling. What was Thomas talking about? What process had he discovered, and what door had he opened? The loose photographs might provide some clues. I spread them out on the desk. Most are standard portraits of the era, similar to those in the album. But 3 stand out as different. The first shows an empty chair, the same ornate chair that Mrs. Winters is seated in her portrait. But there's something strange about the image. A blurry area just above the seat, as if something was moving when the photograph was taken. The second shows the same chair, but now there's a faint outline of a figure seated in it, a ghostly, translucent form that's barely visible. The third is the portrait of Mrs. Winters that's in the album. But this print is different somehow. The smile is not as pronounced, and her eyes don't have that unsettling gleam. I turn the photographs over. On the back of the first is written, "Attempt 1 failed." The second bears the notation, "Attempt 2, partial success." And the third simply says, "Final version, God forgive me." A cold realization washes over me. If I'm understanding these notes and journal entries correctly, my great-grandfather wasn't taking post-mortem photographs in the traditional sense. He was attempting something far more sinister. He was trying to capture the spirits of the dead on film, to create a portal of sorts that would allow them to manifest visibly. And if his final journal entry is to be believed, he succeeded, with horrifying consequences. But that still doesn't explain who took the photograph of Mrs. Winters on June 17th, 2 days after Thomas died, and 3 days after she herself had passed away. Unless, a terrible thought occurs to me. What if no one took that photograph? What if the camera itself captured the image somehow after both photographer and subject were dead? I glance at the pocket Kodak still sitting in the satchel. It seems innocuous enough, a relic of early photography, nothing more. But if my theory is correct, this simple device might be far more dangerous than it appears. I need to examine it more closely. Despite a growing sense of dread, I reach for the camera and lift it from the satchel. It's heavier than I expected, the brass fittings cold against my fingers. The lens is protected by a small cover, which I carefully remove. The glass of the lens catches the beam of my flashlight, reflecting it back as a perfect circle of light on the wall opposite. But as I watch, the circle begins to distort, elongating into an oval, then stretching further into what almost looks like a smile. I nearly drop the camera in shock, fumbling to replace the lens cap. My heart is pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. This is more than just an old family mystery. There's something genuinely wrong here, something that defies rational explanation. The wind has picked up outside, howling around the eaves of the house like a living thing seeking entry. The temperature in the study seems to have dropped several degrees, and I can see my breath fogging in front of me. I need to put everything back where I found it and wait for morning, when I can speak to Mr. Harrison. He clearly knows something about this, and I need his insights before I proceed further. I carefully return the journal and photographs to the satchel, but hesitate when it comes to the camera. Some instinct warns me against keeping it near me overnight. Instead, I place it back in the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, replace the rug and desk, and take only the satchel and album with me. As I climb the stairs to my bedroom, a strange lethargy settles over me. The events of the evening have left me mentally and physically exhausted. All I want now is sleep, though I fear what dreams might come. I place the satchel and album on the nightstand, change into my nightclothes, and climb into bed. Despite my unease, my eyes grow heavy almost immediately. As I drift toward sleep, I could swear I hear the faint click of a camera shutter from somewhere in the darkness of the house. Morning comes with surprising swiftness. Sunlight streaming through the windows. I had forgotten to close the curtains on the night before. For a moment I lie in bed, disoriented, the events of the previous evening seeming like a bad dream. But the album and satchel on my nightstand confirmed that it was all too real. I reach for them, needing to reassure myself that I didn't imagine the whole thing. The album is there, solid and real beneath my fingers, but the satchel is gone. I sit up, suddenly wide awake. I distinctly remember placing both items on the nightstand before going to bed. The album is exactly where I left it, but the satchel has vanished. I search the floor around the bed, thinking it might have fallen, but there's no sign of it. Unnerved, I dress quickly and head downstairs. Perhaps in my exhausted state, I had taken the satchel back to the study without remembering doing so. But when I checked the desk, the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, and every other possible hiding place, I find nothing. The satchel, along with the journal, loose photographs, and most disturbingly, the camera, has disappeared. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes 8, reminding me of my appointment with Mr. Harrison in an hour. I need to leave soon if I'm to make it to his office on time. I grab the album, I'm not letting it out of my sight, and head out to my car. The drive into town is tense. I keep glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following me. The morning is bright and clear, the storm having blown itself out overnight, but I can't shake the feeling of being watched. Mr. Harrison's office is located in one of the oldest buildings in town, a brownstone that has housed the firm of Harrison & Sons for generations. The current Mr. Harrison, Walter, is the grandson of the original founder and has been managing my family's legal affairs since before I was born. His secretary, a woman of indeterminate age with steel gray hair and a perpetual frown, informs me that Mr. Harrison is expecting me and ushers me directly into his office. Walter Harrison rises from behind his desk as I enter. A tall, spare man with a shock of white hair and penetrating blue eyes. He's well into his 70s but carries himself with the vigor of a much younger man. "James," he greets me, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. I trust you brought the item we discussed." I place the album on his desk. "It's all here, Mr. Harrison. The photograph, the hidden newspaper clipping, everything except the satchel, which has gone missing." His eyebrows shoot up. "Missing? What do you mean?" I explain about finding the satchel and its contents the night before, and its mysterious disappearance this morning. As I speak, Harrison's expression grows increasingly grave. "Sit down, James," he says when I've finished. "I think it's time you learned the truth about your family's connection to Ravenwood." He moves to a cabinet in the corner of his office, unlocks it with a key from his pocket, and withdraws a thick folder bound with ribbon. Returning to his desk, he unties the ribbon and opens the folder, revealing a stack of documents. "Your great-grandfather, Thomas Thornfield, was not simply a photographer," he begins. "He was also deeply involved in what we would now call paranormal research. In particular, he was fascinated by the idea of capturing images of the deceased, not just their physical remains, but their actual spirits." He selects a document from the folder and passes it to me. It's a letter from Thomas to the original Mr. Harrison, dated January 1903. "I have made a breakthrough," it reads. "The combination of silver nitrate and the particular electromagnetic frequencies generated by the new electrical system has yielded results beyond my wildest expectations. I have succeeded in capturing not just the image of the deceased, but something of their essence as well. The implications are staggering. If my theory is correct, the barrier between our world and the next is far more permeable than we have ever imagined." Thomas was conducting experiments, Harrison continues as I look up from the letter. Experiments that the people of Ravenwood viewed with suspicion and fear. But there was one person who supported his work, Mrs. Eleanor Winters. He hands me another document, a page torn from what appears to be Mrs. Winters' own journal. "Young Mr. Thornfield visited again today," the entry reads. "His enthusiasm is infectious, though I caution him against proceeding too quickly. The veil between worlds is thin, and those on the other side are eager to return. He believes his camera can capture their images without risk, but I am not so certain. Still, I have agreed to assist him in his experiments. At my age, what have I to fear from the dead? I shall soon be among them myself." Mrs. Winters was something of a local mystic, Harrison explains. People in Ravenwood consulted her for everything from love potions to communicating with departed loved ones. Most dismissed her as an eccentric old woman, but Thomas believed she had genuine insight into the supernatural. "And did she?" I ask. Harrison's gaze is steady. "I believe she did, yes. And I believe that's why she appears to be smiling in that photograph taken after her death." He reaches for the album, opens it to the portrait of Mrs. Winters, and studies it intently. "You see, according to the records I've gathered over the years, Mrs. Winters made a pact with Thomas. She was elderly and knew her time was short. She agreed that after her death, she would attempt to return and manifest through his photographic process, proving once and for all that his method worked. But Thomas died before he could take her post-mortem photograph," I point out. "Yes," Harrison agrees. "That's what makes this all the more disturbing. According to the newspaper reports, Thomas was found dead in his studio on June 15th, the day after Mrs. Winters passed away. Yet this photograph is dated June 17th. So who took it?" I ask, voicing the question that's been haunting me since I first saw the date. Harrison closes the album and leans back in his chair. That, James, is the heart of the mystery. The most logical explanation is that Frederick Simmons, Thomas's assistant, took the photograph. Perhaps he was completing unfinished business for his employer, but that doesn't explain the smile or why the date is written in what appears to be Thomas's handwriting. There's another possibility, I say slowly, hesitant to voice the outlandish theory that's been forming in my mind. What if Thomas took the photograph after his death? What if both he and Mrs. Winters somehow manifested physically enough to create this image? I expect Harrison to dismiss this idea outright, but instead, he nods thoughtfully. That possibility has occurred to me as well. There are accounts from the time, nothing official mind you, just rumors and whispers, that Thomas's body disappeared from the mortuary before it could be prepared for burial. It was found the next day back in his studio, seated at his camera, as if he had been taking one final photograph. A shiver runs through me. And the camera? My great-grandfather's camera that I found in the satchel. What can you tell me about it? Harrison's expression turns grim. That camera was supposed to have been destroyed. Edward, your grandfather, assured me that he had gotten rid of it years ago. He believed it was cursed, that it had somehow caused his father's death and had the power to capture more than just images. If you found it in the house and it's now missing again. He doesn't finish the thought, but he doesn't need to. The implications are clear. What should I do? I ask, feeling suddenly out of my depth. Harrison is silent for a long moment, considering. First, he says finally, we need to find that camera. If it's as dangerous as your grandfather believed, it cannot be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. And second, I think you need to learn more about what really happened in Ravenwood in 1903. There's someone you should meet, someone who might have answers that I don't. He writes a name and address on a slip of paper and hands it to me. Meredith Simmons. She's the granddaughter of Frederick Simmons, Thomas's assistant. She still lives in Ravenwood, in the old Simmons house on Blackwood Lane. If anyone knows the full story of what happened, it's her. I take the paper, folding it carefully and tucking it into my pocket. I'll go today. Harrison nods approvingly. Good. But James, be careful. If even half of what I suspect about that camera is true, you could be in danger. The dead don't always stay where they belong, especially when someone offers them a way back. His words follow me as I leave his office and return to my car. The sunshine that had seemed so bright earlier now feels thin and insubstantial, a fragile barrier against the darkness that seems to be gathering around this mystery. I decide to return to my grandfather's house before heading to Ravenwood. I need to search more thoroughly for the missing satchel and camera, and I want to examine the album again to see if there are any other clues I might have missed. The house seems different when I return, quieter, as if it's holding its breath. I make my way to the study, half expecting to find the satchel returned to its hiding place, but the compartment beneath the floorboards remains empty. I sit at the desk, the album open before me to Mrs. Winters' portrait. In the clear light of day, her smile seems less menacing, more sad, the smile of someone who knows a painful truth. As I stare at the photograph, a detail catches my eye that I hadn't noticed before. In the background, partially obscured by Mrs. Winters' head, is a mirror hanging on the wall of the photography studio, and reflected in that mirror, just barely visible, is the figure of a man standing behind the camera. I grab the magnifying glass from the desk drawer and examine the reflection more closely. The figure is blurry and indistinct, but there's no mistaking the posture of a photographer working with a large format camera of the period. Is this proof that someone else, Frederick Simmons perhaps, took the photograph on June 17th? Or is it evidence of something far more unsettling? The ghost of Thomas Thornfield, returning to his studio to complete one final portrait. I need answers, and it's clear I won't find them here. I close the album, tuck it under my arm, and head out to my car. Ravenwood is about an hour's drive from here, according to the map I consulted before leaving Harrison's office. I should be able to reach Meredith Simmons' house by early afternoon. The drive to Ravenwood takes me through increasingly rural landscapes. The town itself is small, the kind of place that seems to have been bypassed by time. The main street is lined with Victorian-era buildings, many of which look as though they haven't changed since 1903. I find Blackwood Lane on the outskirts of town, a narrow road lined with ancient oak trees that cast dappled shadows across the pavement. The Simmons house is at the very end, a Queen Anne-style home with a wraparound porch and a tower room that rises above the second floor. As I pull into the gravel driveway, I notice an elderly woman sitting on the porch as if she's been expecting me. She rises slowly as I approach, leaning on a cane for support. "Mrs. Simmons?" I call out as I climb the porch steps. "I'm James Thornfield. Walter Harrison suggested I speak with you." She nods, her sharp eyes taking my measure. "I've been waiting for you, Mr. Thornfield. Or rather, I've been waiting for a Thornfield to come asking about that camera for over 50 years. Her directness takes me aback. "Then you know why I'm here." "I do." She gestures to a wicker chair beside her own. "Sit. This is a long story, and these old bones don't stand as well as they used to." I take the offered seat, placing the album on the small table between us. Mrs. Simmons eyes it knowingly but doesn't reach for it. "That belonged to your great-grandfather," she says. "My grandfather, Frederick, kept it hidden for years after Thomas died. He believed it was evidence of something unnatural, something that should remain buried. But it didn't remain buried," I reply. "And now the camera is missing, and I need to understand what's happening before anyone else gets hurt." Mrs. Simmons sighs heavily, her gaze drifting to the distant horizon. "The trouble began when Thomas Thornfield became obsessed with capturing the images of the recently deceased. It was fashionable at the time, you know, post-mortem photography. But Thomas wasn't content with simply arranging the bodies to look peaceful and lifelike. He wanted to capture their spirits, their souls." She pauses, collecting her thoughts. "He believed that the new photographic technologies, combined with certain occult practices, could create a doorway of sorts, a way for the dead to return, if only in image form." "And Mrs. Winters helped him?" I prompt. Mrs. Simmons nods. "Eleanor Winters was known in Ravenwood as a woman with one foot already in the spirit world. Some called her a witch, others a medium. Whatever the truth, she understood things that most people preferred to ignore. She recognized the danger in what Thomas was attempting, but she also saw the potential. They formed an alliance of sorts." "What kind of alliance?" I ask. "A pact," Mrs. Simmons replies, echoing Harrison's earlier words. "Eleanor was dying. Her heart was failing. She agreed to help Thomas with his experiments while she was still alive, and then to be his final subject after her death. She believed she could control the process from the other side, ensure that only she came through the doorway he was trying to open. But something went wrong, I guess. Everything went wrong." Mrs. Simmons corrects me, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Eleanor died on June 14th as planned. Thomas went to his studio on June 15th to prepare for her post-mortem portrait session. But according to my grandfather, when he arrived at the studio that evening to assist, he found Thomas dead at his camera, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth open in a silent scream." She leans forward, her voice intense. "And the camera was still warm, as if it had just been used. But there was no plate inside it, no image captured." I feel a chill despite the warmth of the afternoon. What happened next? My grandfather was frightened naturally. He ran to get the doctor, and when they returned, they found Thomas exactly as he had left him. The doctor pronounced him dead of apoplexy, what we would now call a stroke or heart attack. His body was taken to the mortuary to be prepared for burial. "But it disappeared," I interject, remembering what Harrison had told me. Mrs. Simmons looks surprised. "You know about that?" "Mr. Harrison mentioned rumors that Thomas's body vanished from the mortuary and was later found back in his studio." She nods slowly. "It's true. The mortician went to begin his work the next morning, June 16th, and found the preparation room empty. There was a search, of course, but no trace of Thomas was found, until the morning of June 17th, when my grandfather went to the studio to begin the sad task of packing up Thomas's equipment." Her eyes take on a faraway look, as if she's seeing the scene through her grandfather's eyes. "He found Thomas seated at his camera, just as he had been when he died. But now there was a plate in the camera, a freshly exposed plate, and when my grandfather developed it later that day, it showed Eleanor Winters, seated in that chair, smiling." "But how is that possible?" I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "They were both dead. That, Mr. Thornfield, is the question that has haunted my family for generations. My grandfather believed, and I have come to believe as well, that Thomas succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, or perhaps his worst nightmares. He didn't just create a doorway for the dead to return in image form. He created a way for them to return physically, if only for a brief time." She reaches for the album then, opening it to the portrait of Mrs. Winters. "Look at her eyes," she instructs me. "Really look at them." I lean in, studying the photograph more carefully than I ever have before, and I see it then. a quality to Mrs. Winter's gaze that I had mistaken for a mere trick of light or shadow. Her eyes are not looking at the camera, but through it, at the person behind it. There's recognition there, and something else. A warning, perhaps. She's looking at Thomas. I whisper, "Yes," Mrs. Simmons confirms. She's looking at Thomas, who should have been as dead as she was. And yet for that one moment, the time it took to capture this image, they were both here again, in this world. And the camera? What happened to it after that? Mrs. Simmons' expression grows troubled. My grandfather locked it away. He believed it had been changed by what happened, that it had absorbed some essence of the boundary between life and death. He warned your grandfather, Edward, never to use it, never even to look through its lens. Edward took possession of it when he settled his father's estate, promising to destroy it. But he didn't, I say. I found it in a hidden compartment in his study, and now it's missing again. A look of alarm crosses Mrs. Simmons's face. Missing? Are you certain? I explain about finding the satchel with the camera, journal, and photographs, and its subsequent disappearance overnight. As I speak, her alarm visibly grows. This is grave news, Mr. Thornfield. If the camera has been activated again after all these years, then the doorway may have reopened, and there's no telling who or what might come through. What can we do? I ask, a sense of urgency building within me. Mrs. Simmons rises from her chair with surprising agility for her age. Come with me. There's something you need to see. She leads me into the house, through a foyer decorated with antiques that might well date back to 1903, and up a narrow staircase to the second floor. At the end of a long hallway is a door, which she unlocks with a key from a chain around her neck. The room beyond is small and windowless, more of a large closet than a proper room. The walls are lined with shelves, and on those shelves are dozens of photographic plates, each in its own protective sleeve. My grandfather's collection, Mrs. Simmons explains. After what happened with Thomas and Eleanor, he became obsessed with understanding the phenomenon. He began collecting examples of what he called spirit photography, images that appeared to capture something beyond the physical world. She selects one of the plates and holds it up to the light fixture overhead. It shows a family group, parents and 3 children, posed formally for the camera. But there, hovering just behind them, is a translucent figure, its features indistinct but unmistakably human. Most of these are fakes, of course. Mrs. Simmons continues, returning the plate to its place and selecting another. Double exposures, manipulated negatives, the tricks of the trade that charlatans use to prey on the grieving. But some, she pauses, her expression solemn. Some are genuine, or at least my grandfather believed they were. The plate she shows me now depicts a man in clerical garb, seated at a desk with an open Bible before him. Standing behind him, with one hand resting on his shoulder, is a woman in white, her face a blur of motion. Reverend Michael Collins of the First Baptist Church of Ravenwood, and his wife Sarah, who had died in childbirth 3 months before this photograph was taken, Mrs. Simmons narrates. Reverend Collins swore on his Bible that he was alone when this picture was made, and the photographer, not Thomas but another man from a neighboring town, confirmed that there was no one else in the room. She replaces this plate and draws out a third. But this is the one I wanted to show you. The image on this plate makes my blood run cold. It shows Thomas Thornfield's photography studio. I recognize it from the portrait of Mrs. Winters. The chair is there, empty, but standing beside it, his hand resting on its back, is a man I instantly know must be my great-grandfather. And seated at the camera, looking directly into the lens, is Mrs. Winters herself, her smile now a grin that stretches too wide across her face. The roles are reversed, I murmur, understanding dawning. She's the photographer here, and he's the subject. Yes, Mrs. Simmons confirms. This plate was found in Thomas's camera when his body was discovered for the second time on the morning of June 17th. My grandfather developed it but never showed it to anyone else. He believed it was proof that something had gone terribly wrong with the experiment, that Mrs. Winters had somehow taken control of the process from beyond death. But why? I ask. What would she want with Thomas's camera? Or with Thomas himself, for that matter? Mrs. Simmons returns the plate to its shelf and leads me back downstairs to the porch. Once we're seated again, she continues her explanation. My grandfather spent years trying to answer that question. He corresponded with spiritualists, mediums, and occultists across the country. And eventually, he came to a theory, one that I find all too plausible. She fixes me with a steady gaze. Eleanor Winters was not what she seemed. The locals called her a witch or a medium, but my grandfather came to believe she was something else entirely, something older and far more dangerous, a being that had lived many lives over many centuries, always moving on to a new host as each body aged and died. She needed Thomas's camera not to prove the existence of an afterlife, but to ensure her own continued existence in this world. I don't understand, I admit. The camera, Mrs. Simmons explains patiently, was modified by Thomas according to Eleanor's specifications. She guided his experiments, shaped his understanding of what he was trying to achieve, but her goal wasn't to create a doorway for the dead to return in image form. It was to create a vessel, a repository for her essence that would allow her to transfer into a new body when her current one failed. The implications of what she's saying begin to dawn on me. You're suggesting that Mrs. Winters used the camera to, what, possess my great-grandfather? Mrs. Simmons nods gravely. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. But the process wasn't perfect. Thomas died during the attempt. His heart gave out under the strain, and Mrs. Winters found herself trapped, her essence split between her own decaying corpse and the camera that was supposed to be her salvation. So when Thomas's body was found at the camera on June 17th, I begin. It was Mrs. Winters trying again. Mrs. Simmons finishes for me, using what remained of Thomas's physical form to create one final image, a portrait of herself that would serve as an anchor for her spirit, a way to remain tethered to this world until she could find another host. I glanced down at the album, still open to Mrs. Winters' smiling face. And did she? Find another host, I mean? Mrs. Simmons is silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on some distant point. I believe she did, yes? There were incidents in Ravenwood in the years following Thomas's death, people who changed suddenly, dramatically, after coming into contact with items from his studio. My grandfather documented several cases before his own death in 1931. And after that, I press. The trail grows cold, she admits. The camera disappeared for decades, presumably hidden by your grandfather. Without it, Mrs. Winters, or whatever she truly was, would have been limited in her ability to transfer to new hosts. She might have remained dormant, waiting for the camera to resurface. Until now, I whisper, the full horror of the situation finally sinking in, until I found it and removed it from its hiding place. Precisely. Mrs. Simmons's voice is grim. And if it's missing now, as you say, then we must assume the worst, that it's been activated again, and that Mrs. Winters is once more seeking a suitable host. But who? I ask, though a terrible suspicion is already forming in my mind. Who would she target? Mrs. Simmons gives me a pitying look. Who better than a Thornfield? Someone with a connection to the original experiment, someone who might be receptive to her influence due to shared blood with Thomas. The implication is clear, and a chill runs down my spine. You think she's coming for me? I think you need to be very careful, Mrs. Simmons says, her voice softening. And I think we need to find that camera before it can be used again. As if on cue, my phone rings in my pocket. I pull it out and see Mr. Harrison's number on the screen. Excuse me, I say to Mrs. Simmons and answer the call. James? Harrison's voice is tense. Urgent. You need to come back to the house right away. Something's happened. What is it? I ask, my pulse quickening. The power went out last night during the storm, Harrison explains. The backup generator kicked in for the security system, but it malfunctioned somehow. The cameras were offline for several hours. When the system came back up this morning, the monitoring company called me because they detected movement in the study. Someone was in the house? I ask, alarmed. Yes, Harrison confirms. But that's not the strangest part. When the security team reviewed the footage, they saw something unusual. You need to see it for yourself. How soon can you get back here? I glance at Mrs. Simmons, who is watching me intently. I'm in Ravenwood now, at Meredith Simmons' house. It'll take me about an hour to get back. Good, I'll meet you there. Harrison pauses, then adds, and James, be careful. Don't stop anywhere along the way and don't speak to anyone. I know how paranoid that sounds, but after what I've seen on that footage, he trails off, leaving me to imagine what could have possibly rattled the normally unflappable Walter Harrison. I'll be there as soon as I can, I promise, and end the call. Trouble? Mrs. Simmons asks as I pocket my phone. I quickly explain Harrison's call. As I speak, her expression grows increasingly concerned. You should go, she says when I've finished, but take this with you. She removes a small object from her pocket and presses it into my hand. It's a silver locket on a delicate chain, tarnished with age. My grandfather gave this to me, she explains. He said it was a protection against influences from beyond. I've worn it all my life and never had cause to doubt its efficacy. I start to protest, but she closes my fingers around the locket. Please, I'm an old woman with few years left to me. You're facing something I've only read about in my grandfather's journals. You need this more than I do. Touched by her concern, I slip the locket into my pocket. Thank you, Mrs. Simmons, for everything. She nods, her sharp eyes holding mine. Remember what I've told you, Mr. Thornfield. Whatever entity inhabited Eleanor Winters, whatever has been waiting all these years to return, it is not human. It never was. It will use your emotions against you, especially your curiosity. That was how it ensnared your great-grandfather. I'll remember, I promise, rising to leave. And I'll let you know what we find at the house. The drive back from Ravenwood seems to take longer than the journey there, though my speedometer tells me I'm driving well above the limit. My mind races with everything I've learned about Thomas and his experiments, about Mrs. Winters and her true nature, about the camera and its terrible purpose. Could it really be possible? Could some ancient non-human entity have been using human hosts for centuries, moving from one to another as bodies aged and died? And could such a being now be targeting me, seeing in me a suitable vessel for its continued existence? The rational part of my mind wants to dismiss the whole idea as fantasy, the product of superstitious minds in a less enlightened age. But I've seen too much evidence now to deny that something extraordinary happened in Ravenwood in 1903, something that defies conventional explanation. As I near my grandfather's house, I notice Mr. Harrison's car already parked in the driveway. Another vehicle is there as well, a van marked with the logo of a local security company. 2 technicians are visible, working near the front entrance. I park and hurry inside, finding Harrison in the study, deep in conversation with a man in a security uniform. They both look up as I enter. "James, thank goodness," Harrison says, relief evident in his voice. "This is Mr. Donovan from Secure Home Systems. He's been reviewing the footage from last night." Donovan nods to me, his expression serious. "Mr. Thornfield, I've got the relevant segment queued up on my tablet if you'd like to see it." "Please," I say, my mouth suddenly dry with apprehension. Donovan hands me the tablet, already playing a video file. The footage is from a security camera mounted in the corner of the study, providing a view of most of the room, including the desk and the area where the hidden compartment is located. The timestamp at the bottom of the screen shows 3:17 a.m. The study is dark, illuminated only by the faint moonlight filtering through the windows. For several seconds, nothing happens. Then, slowly, the floorboards beneath the desk begin to lift, seemingly of their own accord. The hidden compartment is opening, but there's no one visible who could be operating it. As I watch, the leather satchel rises from the compartment, hovering in midair for a moment before settling on the desk. The clasp opens, and the journal, loose photographs, and finally the camera float out and arrange themselves neatly on the desktop. Then, most disturbingly of all, the camera seems to activate itself. The lens extends, the shutter opens and closes with an audible click, and a bright flash illuminates the room for a split second. In that flash, something is briefly visible, a figure standing before the desk, directly in front of the camera. The image is too quick and too blurred to make out details, but it appears to be a woman in old-fashioned dress, her face a pale oval in the darkness. The video continues for another minute, showing the camera, journal, and photographs being returned to the satchel, which then floats back to the hidden compartment. The floorboards settle back into place, and the study is still once more. I look up from the tablet, my heart pounding. "Has this been altered in any way?" I ask Donovan. He shakes his head firmly. "No, sir. This is the raw footage from our system. I've never seen anything like it in 15 years in the security business. If I hadn't watched it myself, I'd swear it was some kind of hoax." "Thank you," I say, handing the tablet back to him. "Could you give Mr. Harrison and me a moment alone, please?" Once Donovan has left the room, I turn to Harrison. "You saw it too?" He nods, his face pale. "I've been trying to come up with a rational explanation, some kind of elaborate mechanism perhaps, or even an intruder using fishing line or wires to move objects while remaining out of frame. But none of that explains what we saw in the flash. That figure. It was Mrs. Winters, I say with certainty. Or rather, whatever has been using her name and image all these years. I quickly relate everything Mrs. Simmons told me about her grandfather's theories, about Mrs. Winters being some kind of ancient entity that transfers from host to host, about the camera being modified to facilitate this process, about Thomas becoming an unwitting victim in her plans. Harrison listens intently, his expression growing graver by the minute. When I finish, he walks to the window and stares out at the gathering dusk for a long moment before speaking. I've spent my entire professional life dealing in facts and evidence, he says finally. Legal documents, witness testimonies, concrete proof that would stand up in a court of law. What you're describing, what we both saw on that video, falls so far outside that realm that my instinct is to reject it outright. He turns back to face me, and yet I cannot deny the evidence of my own eyes. Something was in this house last night, something that operated that camera without human intervention. And if Mrs. Simmons is correct about the nature of this entity and its intentions, then we need to find that camera and destroy it, I finish for him, before it can be used again. Harrison nods slowly. The question is, where do we look? If the entity can move objects without physical contact, it could have taken the satchel anywhere. I think back to what Mrs. Simmons told me about the entity's methods. It needs a host, I say, thinking aloud. A human vessel. And according to Mrs. Simmons, it prefers someone with a connection to the original experiment. Someone like me, with Thornfield blood. A thought strikes me. The portrait studio. Thomas's old studio in Ravenwood. If this entity is trying to recreate the conditions of 1903, that's where it would go. Is the building still standing? Harrison asks. Mrs. Simmons didn't say, but it's worth checking. Do you have a local directory? Something that might list historical landmarks in Ravenwood? Harrison pulls out his phone and begins searching. After a few minutes, he looks up with a gleam of triumph in his eyes. Thornfield Photography Studio, 217 Main Street, Ravenwood. Now listed on the National Register of Historic Places and maintained as a museum by the Ravenwood Historical Society. Open Thursdays through Sundays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Today's Thursday, I note, checking my watch. It's after 4 now, so the museum will be closed. But that might work to our advantage. Fewer people around to get caught up in whatever happens. Harrison looks at me sharply. James, you're not seriously considering going back there tonight, after everything we've seen and heard? I don't see that we have much choice, I reply. If this entity is as dangerous as Mrs. Simmons believes, and if it's now active after decades of dormancy, we can't simply ignore it and hope it goes away. The camera is the key. Mrs. Simmons was certain of that. We need to find it and destroy it. Harrison runs a hand through his white hair, a gesture of frustration. This is madness. We should call the authorities. And tell them what? I counter. That we believe a supernatural entity is using a 120-year-old camera to transfer itself into human hosts? They'd dismiss us as lunatics. Then at least let me come with you, Harrison insists. 2 pairs of eyes are better than 1, and I've been involved in this business almost as long as you've been alive. I'm about to agree when a memory surfaces. Something Mrs. Simmons said about the entity using emotions as a tool, particularly curiosity. Harrison's professional interest in this case has been evident from the start. Could that make him vulnerable? Mr. Harrison, I say carefully, have you ever handled the camera yourself, or looked through its lens? He frowns, thinking. No, I don't believe so. Edward, your grandfather, showed it to me once years ago, but he kept it in its case. He was quite adamant that no one should touch it directly. Good, I say, relieved. Then I think it's better if you stay here. We can't be certain how this entity might try to influence someone who gets too close, and I wouldn't want to put you at risk. Harrison looks like he wants to argue further, but something in my expression must convince him. Very well, he concedes reluctantly. But at least take this. He removes a small revolver from his jacket pocket and offers it to me. It belonged to your grandfather. He insisted I keep it safe for you, along with the deed to the house. I'm not sure it will be effective against whatever we're dealing with, but it might provide some measure of protection. I take the revolver, checking that it's loaded. The weight of it is reassuring in my hand, a solid piece of reality in a situation that's becoming increasingly surreal. Thank you, I say, tucking it into my own pocket beside Mrs. Simmons' locket. I'll call you as soon as I learn anything. As I prepare to leave, gathering a flashlight and making sure my phone is fully charged, Harrison places a hand on my shoulder. Be careful, James. Whatever this entity is, it's had a century to plan its return. It won't be easily thwarted. His words echo in my mind as I drive back to Ravenwood for the second time that day. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows across the road and turning the surrounding forest into a dark, impenetrable mass. By the time I reach the outskirts of town, true night has fallen. Main Street is quiet, most of the shops already closed for the evening. I drive slowly, scanning the buildings until I spot number 217, a narrow two-story structure of red brick with large display windows on the ground floor. A discreet plaque beside the door identifies it as the former Thornfield Photography Studio, now preserved as a museum. I park across the street and sit for a moment, observing the building. No lights are visible inside, and there's no sign of activity. If the entity brought the camera here, it's being discreet about its presence. I check the revolver one more time, then slip Mrs. Simmons' locket around my neck, tucking it beneath my shirt where it rests cool against my skin. Then, flashlight in hand, I cross the street to the studio. The front door is locked, as expected. I move around to the alley beside the building, looking for another entrance. There's a back door, also locked, but the window beside it is slightly ajar. It's small, but I think I can squeeze through. With some effort, I manage to push the window up further and hoist myself inside, landing as quietly as possible on the floor of what appears to be a storeroom. My flashlight reveals shelves lined with photographic equipment from various eras: cameras, developing trays, bottles of chemicals, and boxes of glass plates. I move cautiously to the door and open it a crack, peering into the space beyond. It's the main studio area, a large room with high ceilings and windows that would have provided natural light for daytime photography sessions. Even in the darkness, I can recognize it from the background of Mrs. Winter's portrait. The ornate chair is there, positioned exactly as it was in the photograph. Behind it is the painted backdrop of a lighthouse on a rocky coast. And in front of it, set up on a tripod, is a camera, not a modern one, but an antique large-format camera that would have been state-of-the-art in 1903. My heart races as I recognize it from the satchel I found in my grandfather's study. This is Thomas Thornfield's camera, the one that supposedly captured Mrs. Winter's smile 2 days after her death. I step fully into the room, my flashlight beam playing over the setup. Everything has been arranged to recreate the conditions of that fateful portrait session. But where is the entity that brought the camera here, and what is it planning? As if in answer to my unspoken questions, a voice speaks from the shadows at the far end of the room. A woman's voice, soft and melodious, with an accent I can't quite place. At last, a Thornfield returns to the family business. How appropriate. I swing my flashlight toward the voice, and there, emerging from the darkness, is a woman. She appears to be in her early 30s, dressed in modern clothes, jeans and a simple blouse, but her bearing and the way she holds herself suggest someone much older. "Who are you?" I demand, though I already suspect the answer. She smiles, the same slight, knowing smile that I recognize from the photograph of Mrs. Winters. "I've had many names over many lifetimes," she says, moving closer. "Eleanor Winters was but one of them. A useful identity for a time, but ultimately limited, as all human vessels are. You're the entity Mrs. Simmons warned me about," I say, taking an involuntary step back. "The one that used my great-grandfather's camera to transfer yourself into new hosts." Her smile widens. "Meredith has been quite the custodian of Frederick's records, hasn't she?" "Yes, I am what you might call a traveler, a consciousness that has moved from body to body throughout human history. Your kind are so fragile, so temporary, but I have found ways to endure." She gestures to the camera. "Your great-grandfather was a brilliant man, far ahead of his time. He believed he was developing a method to photograph the dead, but what he actually created was a mechanism for transfer, a way to capture and redirect consciousness itself. And you used him," I say, anger rising within me. "You manipulated him into building this abomination, and then you killed him when he discovered what you really were." She shakes her head, almost sadly. "Thomas wasn't meant to die. His heart gave out during the first transfer attempt, an unfortunate weakness in his physical form. I had hoped to use him as my next vessel, but his death complicated matters. I was forced to improvise. The photograph, I realize. The one dated June 17th. You used what was left of Thomas to take that picture, to create a, what did Mrs. Simmons call it? An anchor for your spirit. Very good," she says approvingly. "The photograph served as a temporary repository, a place for my consciousness to reside until I could find a more suitable host. But the process was imperfect. I was fragmented, divided between the image and the camera itself. For decades, I existed in a kind of half-life, aware but unable to act. Until you found the camera and removed it from its hiding place. Why me? I ask, though I fear I already know the answer. Why now, after all this time? Her expression becomes almost pitying. Because you are a Thornfield, with the same innate sensitivity to the boundary between worlds that Thomas possessed. And because the time is right, the alignment of certain cosmic forces makes the transfer process more likely to succeed now than at any point in the past century. She takes another step toward me, her eyes, which I now notice are an unusual amber color, fixed on mine. I've been waiting for you, James, for someone who could complete what Thomas began. Together, we can perfect the process that he only glimpsed in theory. I feel a strange pull toward her, a compelling force that seems to bypass my rational mind and speak directly to something deeper, more primitive. With an effort of will, I resist, my hand closing around the silver locket beneath my shirt. No, I say firmly. I know what you are, and I know what you want. You need a new host because the one you're currently using is failing. That's why you've gone to all this trouble, recreating the original setup, bringing me here. You want to use Thomas's camera to transfer yourself into me. Her smile fades slightly. This body has served its purpose, but its time is indeed growing short. The transfer process places enormous strain on human physiology. Few hosts last more than a decade before cellular degradation begins. She gestures at herself. Caroline Fisher, that was this one's name, a promising young curator at the Ravenwood Historical Society. She had such a passion for local history, such curiosity about the old photography studio. When she discovered certain documents in the Society's archives, documents that hinted at the true nature of Thomas's experiments, I knew she was the one. That was 8 years ago. A wave of revulsion washes over me. This entity has been wearing Caroline Fisher like a costume, using her body while her true self has been, what? Suppressed? Destroyed? I don't want to contemplate the possibilities. I won't help you, I declare, backing away further. And I won't become your next victim. Victim? She repeats, sounding genuinely surprised. Is that what you think this is? James, I'm offering you something few humans ever experience. A glimpse behind the veil, an understanding of the true nature of consciousness. Thomas saw it at the end. He understood what we could achieve together. He died in terror, I counter. Whatever he saw, it wasn't enlightenment. It was horror. Her expression hardens, the pretense of warmth falling away. You speak of things you cannot comprehend. Thomas was unprepared for the transfer process. You need not make the same mistake. Surrender willingly, and the transition will be less traumatic. As she speaks, I notice something disturbing. Her features seem to be shifting slightly, becoming less defined, as if the face of Caroline Fisher is beginning to melt away, revealing something else beneath, something ancient and decidedly inhuman. My hand moves to my pocket, closing around the revolver. Stay back, I warn. I don't want to hurt you, or rather the body you're wearing, but I will if I have to. She laughs, a sound that raises the hair on the back of my neck. A weapon? How primitive. Do you truly believe that will stop me? I have existed for millennia, moving from vessel to vessel. I was ancient when the first human learned to capture images on treated paper. Your bullets might destroy this body, but they cannot touch what I truly am. Even as she speaks, I notice that the camera on the tripod has begun to change. The lens is extending on its own, turning slightly to focus on me. The entity follows my gaze and smiles again. A terrible smile that stretches too wide across Caroline Fisher's increasingly fluid features. The process has already begun, she says. The camera remembers its purpose. It remembers you, James Thornfield. The blood calls to blood. You cannot resist what is already in motion. I raise the revolver, aiming not at her but at the camera. Then I'll destroy the mechanism of transfer, I declare. Without the camera, you can't complete the process. Her expression contorts with alarm, the first genuine emotion I've seen from her. No, you don't understand what you're doing. The camera is merely a conduit. Destroying it now, when the transfer has begun, would have unpredictable consequences. I'll take my chances, I reply, and pull the trigger. The sound of the shot is deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet strikes the camera dead center, shattering the lens and sending fragments of glass and metal flying in all directions. The entity screams, a sound no human throat could produce, and Caroline Fisher's body convulses, her back arching unnaturally. For a moment, The air in the studio seems to thicken, becoming almost viscous. The temperature drops precipitously, my breath suddenly visible as white vapor. And then, most terrifying of all, the shattered remains of the camera begin to glow with an eldritch light, a sickly green phosphorescence that pulses like a heartbeat. "What have you done?" The entity wails, its voice now a cacophony of tones layered atop one another. The containment field is destabilizing. The anchor points are collapsing. "You've doomed us both." Caroline Fisher's body continues to contort, limbs twisting at impossible angles. And then, to my horror, her skin begins to split along invisible seams, revealing not blood and tissue beneath, but a swirling darkness that seems to consume light rather than reflect it. This darkness pours forth from the rupturing human shell, coalescing into a shape that my mind struggles to comprehend. Something vaguely humanoid but constantly shifting, with too many limbs and not enough substance. It hovers in the air between me and the remains of the camera, its form rippling like smoke in a strong wind. "Centuries of patience," it hisses, its voice now completely inhuman, a rasping, multi-toned sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Centuries of careful planning, undone by a Thornfield's stubbornness. There is a certain symmetry to it. The glowing fragments of the camera pulse more intensely, and the entity is drawn toward them, stretching and distorting as if caught in a powerful current. It fights against this pull, portions of its amorphous form reaching toward me with frightening intent. "If I cannot have you as a vessel," it declares, "then I will take what I can, a fragment of your essence to sustain me until I can find another way back." One tendril of darkness shoots toward me with blinding speed, striking me in the center of my chest before I can react. Pain explodes through my body, a cold, invasive agony unlike anything I've ever experienced. I feel as if something fundamental is being torn from me, extracted against my will. Instinctively, my hand closes around the silver locket Mrs. Simmons gave me. As soon as my fingers touch it, the locket grows warm, then hot, almost painfully so. The entity shrieks in what sounds like genuine pain, the tendril connected to my chest wavering and beginning to dissolve. "Protection," it snarls, recognizing the locket, Frederick's little trinket. He always was more perceptive than Thomas gave him credit for. The pull from the shattered camera intensifies, the green glow pulsing so rapidly now that it's almost a continuous light. The entity is drawn inexorably toward it, its form stretching thinner and thinner, like taffy being pulled to its breaking point. "This isn't over, Thornfield," it promises, its voice fading as its substance is drawn into the glowing fragments. "The camera is damaged, not destroyed. As long as a single piece remains, I have a tether to this world. I will return, when you least expect it, when you've convinced yourself that this was all a dream, or a delusion. Then I will find you." With these final words, the last of the entity is pulled into the remains of the camera. The green glow flares blindingly bright for an instant, then vanishes completely, leaving the studio in darkness once more. I stand motionless for several minutes, my heart pounding, my limbs trembling with residual terror and adrenaline. On the floor before me lies the body of Caroline Fisher, or what remains of it. It looks desiccated, as if all moisture has been suddenly extracted, leaving only a dry husk that barely resembles a human being. And scattered around it are the pieces of Thomas Thornfield's camera, no longer glowing, but still, I sense, dangerous. I can feel a faint vibration from them, a subtle wrongness that makes my skin crawl. I know what I have to do. I gather every fragment I can find, using my handkerchief to avoid direct contact. Then I take them outside, to the alley behind the studio. There's a metal trash can there, used by the museum staff. I empty it, place the camera fragments inside, and add the contents of a small can of lighter fluid I find in the storeroom. As I strike a match and drop it into the can, I feel a momentary resistance, as if the air itself is trying to prevent the flame from catching. But then the lighter fluid ignites with a whoosh, and the fragments begin to burn with an unnatural intensity, the flames tinged with that same sickly green phosphorescence. I watch until I'm certain that nothing recoverable remains, until the metal components have melted into unrecognizable lumps and the glass has fused into twisted blobs. Only then do I return to the studio to deal with the more complicated problem of Caroline Fisher's remains. In the end, I call Harrison. He arrives 2 hours later, bringing with him a doctor who owes him a favor, and who asks no questions as he examines the body and pronounces death from natural causes, most likely a rare genetic condition causing rapid cellular degeneration. Harrison has connections at the local funeral home as well, and by morning all official matters have been handled discreetly. We never speak publicly about what really happened in the photography studio that night. But in private, Harrison helps me research more about the entity that called itself Eleanor Winters, about its possible origins and the true extent of its powers. We find references in obscure texts to similar beings, consciousness parasites that have moved through human history, wearing human forms, but never truly becoming human themselves. Mrs. Simmons provides additional insights from her grandfather's records, and together, we piece together a history of the entity's movements through Ravenwood and beyond, always seeking new hosts, always searching for more efficient methods of transfer. Thomas Thornfield was not its first victim, merely its most technologically innovative one. I keep the silver locket with me always now, a reminder and a protection. And I've taken up photography myself, conventional digital photography, with no connection to the silver nitrate processes that somehow enabled the entity's transfers. It's a way of reclaiming my family's legacy, of transforming something terrible into something benign. But sometimes when I develop my own photographs, I find myself scrutinizing the backgrounds, the shadows, the reflections in windows and mirrors, looking for signs of something that should not be there, something smiling at me from beyond the boundary of death. And on rare occasions, though perhaps it's just my imagination, I think I catch a glimpse of her. Not Eleanor Winters as she appeared in that 1903 portrait, but something older, something that was wearing Eleanor's form just as it later wore Caroline Fisher's, something that has worn countless human faces throughout the centuries, something that may still be out there, waiting for the chance to return. But for now at least, the camera is destroyed, the doorway is closed, and the dead, I hope, can finally rest in peace.